Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Sportsedge.com fan forum. I'm your host, Kels Sportzedge, and I'm wearing the classic Tracy McGrady jersey for this episode, and coming to you on a beautiful Tuesday here from the home studios. Just reminding you, if you want to make your own Sports Edge fan forum video, just log on to Sportsedge.com, sign up to become a contributor, and you can sit in front of the camera and rant incoherently just like I'm about to do for the next 10 minutes about your own sports topics. And the thing that set me off today, the reason why I wanted to do another Sports Edge fan forum video, was because of the whole Braun suspension in Major League Baseball, and the reaction to it really is a thing that I want to get to, that I thought was most interesting. And I take a look at Braun. Of course, we all know what happened a couple of years ago. He won the NL MVP award, and then he got caught for performance-enhancing drugs. Ended up having to, would have had to serve a big suspension for that, but ended up in a position where the guy who was collecting his sample ended up taking it home and putting it in his refrigerator instead of FedExing it. Basically taking it home like it was a can of orange juice or something, putting it in there, which was ridiculous. But he ended up winning that appeal, ended up appealing that, did Braun, and winning it on that technicality. Nothing, of course, his sample wasn't tainted, although he did go out of his way to basically tarnish the reputation of the poor guy who brought the sample home and didn't FedEx it when he was supposed to. That's basically the only thing that happened. The only difference between last time and Braun coming out like he was Lance Armstrong, saying that he's denying everything. He had his buddy Aaron Rodgers deny it as well. So I thought that was really interesting, the reaction that Braun had. And I think the basically indignance that everyone had, maybe that he had as well, but I'm really talking about what ESPN did and the way that they reacted to it. They broke into the Yankees-Rangers game last night. They had Barry Larkin acting like he was so offended by everything that happened, like everyone was so shocked and it was the biggest story we've ever seen, when really it was not shocking at all that this had happened. His name had been linked to PEDs for a long time now, since the first episode came out with the whole FedEx thing and the orange juice and whatever else was going on there. But I think it's really interesting because, you know, you see this type of reaction. We saw Curt Schilling yelling and screaming on TV on Baseball Tonight on the set there. We saw Barry Larkin, them going back and forth with each other. And I thought it's interesting because the same exact thing kind of is happening in football here with Von Miller, one of the best players in that sport, one of the faces of the sport, really, when you look at football. He's basically been popped with a 4-game suspension. And the difference here is that in baseball, one time you get caught once, you're done for 50 games. You get caught twice, it's 100 games. The penalties have really become strong. They become stringent. It's tough to do it in baseball now and not get caught. Whereas in football, you look at, everybody loves football. It's America's favorite sport right now. And you take a look at it, and there are so many of these guys who look like they're not even in the same species as us as human beings. When you take a look at all their muscles, some of these guys have biceps bigger than my upper body, which is not really saying too much, but at the same time, I think it's completely ridiculous, and we are naive as sports fans to think that this is not going on in football. And I venture to say that the problem right now is much worse in football than it is in baseball, yet you hear nothing about the things that happen in football. You look at Von Miller getting suspended, and we're not sure if he's getting suspended for PEDs or if he's actually going to be suspended just for recreational drug use. That hasn't actually come out yet, but there haven't been a lot of guys who have gotten caught in football and it's really stuck to their reputation. I think you look at Ray Lewis with the whole deer antler spray thing that happened in the Super Bowl. That basically washed over. I think, you know, a lot of guys have been doing that. I think the steroids and the performance-enhancing drug problem is way worse in football right now than it ever was in baseball. I think you take a look at the guys, a recent survey came out and said that 70% of football players were using HGH, and we don't even have a real solid testing plan for that. I think Chris Mortensen explained, I think it was Mortensen on ESPN that explained to us earlier on SportsCenter today that you have to test positive actually 3 times before you get suspended in NFL. That is an absolute joke. That is a complete joke. It's a travesty. It's a sham. It's a mockery. It's a Travis mockery, really, that is going on in the NFL. And I think especially with the outrage that we hear in baseball, it's not anywhere close to what you hear in the NFL. No one cares about what's happening in the NFL. I'm not sure if it's because there's a lot of guys wearing helmets. There's 22 guys on the field. You can't really see their face. You don't really identify with them and recognize them. We pretty much just think of them as gladiators, as warriors that are just, going up against each other. And this thing has been happening since the 70s. When you take a look at the whole steroid problem in football has been going on since the 70s, really. I think you look before that era. I think you look at the guys who, offensive linemen, looked like normal people. They didn't look like, crazy 300-pound guys who could run 4.8 40s. I think that the whole game has changed completely, and I think we'd be absolutely naive as fans to think that this is not going on in football. I think you'd be worse than the naivety that we had before with baseball, because we've been through this before. We've gone through it now. I don't think there should be any innocent until proven guilty type things going on in the NFL right now, because we've seen this happen before. We've seen it happen in track and field. We've seen it happen in cycling, where those two sports have basically been, completely decimated by performance-enhancing drugs. But the thing is, at least those sports are testing for them. At least they're catching guys. The NFL right now is way behind. Ages behind in its testing policy, and I think someone has to call them out for that right now, because this could end up being one of the biggest scandals we've ever seen. If 70% of guys in that recent survey, if 70% of them are on steroids, that's insane. That's just ridiculous to see 70% of the league is on steroids or on HGH. I mean, that is a huge scandal. That is something we've never seen before. And I really think to compete in the NFL right now, you almost have to be. When you take a look at the physicality of the game, the physical toughness that each of these guys have, the brutality that the game does possess. If someone's cheating over there, you basically have to, in order to stay on the roster. I think, we've seen the difference that steroids can have, that HGH can have in guys. They took Barry Bonds, who was a Hall of Fame caliber player, certainly not one of the greatest players ever, and they made him, Babe Ruth, modern day Babe Ruth, even better than Babe Ruth ever was. Basically, at the age of like 45 or whatever he was, his head size grew like 5 hat sizes. It was completely ridiculous. But he basically became a cyborg from outer space that was like the best baseball player we could have ever created. And I think it's just been absolutely ridiculous what has happened, and the fact that these steroids do work. They do, push guys over the top, and I think we've seen that. I think there's absolutely no doubt about it. Look at Melky Cabrera. He turned into Ty Cobb last year. So I think it's completely ridiculous to say that steroids don't have a huge impact. They make good players great. As Curt Schilling said last night, they make great players Hall of Famers, and they make bad players, major league caliber players. Think of what they're doing in football as well. They could be making, I think you have to question what happened to Adrian Peterson last year, coming back from that injury so quickly. I think there's a lot of questions that are going on that we're not really asking, that I think we should be asking in football, and we could be going through the 90s in baseball all over again here in this era with football, with everything that's going on. And one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and obviously I have no scientific evidence to back this up, but you take a look at the fact that all these guys, I think you remember wrestling a few years ago. If you do, some of those guys from back in the day, they took so many drugs, so many performance-enhancing things to really be as cartoonish as they possibly could out there on the wrestling mat in the WWF. And I think you look, what happened to them. A lot of those guys died young. A lot of those guys went through tragedies. Similar things now are happening in football, where you're seeing some of these guys commit suicide. Obviously we saw Junior Seau die early, and I think everyone's blaming it all on the concussions and the head trauma and the injuries that are happening. I think we have to start looking a little bit at maybe the impact that steroids might be having on those guys, because I definitely think we've seen it before, and I think we'll probably see it again, not only in the NFL if they don't clean their act up, but in other sports as well. So I think it's really interesting to see. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, certainly down the line, and I think we all need to wise up a little bit here with the NFL. I think it's certainly just as big of a problem as we've had in Major League Baseball. Thanks for watching this edition of the Sports Edge Fan Forum. If you want to go on and make your own video, just log on to sportsedge.com. You can sign up to become a contributor and rant incoherently for 10 minutes as I just did. What do I know, though? I'm just a guy wearing a cartoon dinosaur on his shirt. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.